I always thought that cheating was something obvious. Something you could see with your eyes, feel with your body, hear in someone's tone. A kiss meant for someone else, a secret meeting, the classic smells like someone else's perfume. But the most terrifying betrayal comes quietly. It doesn't make noise, doesn't scream, doesn't demand memes or dramatic phrases. It starts with small things. The ones you don't pay attention to. The ones that seem too insignificant to fear. That's exactly how it began for me. In the evening, I walked into the living room and saw her. She was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under herself, wrapped in her favorite soft blanket she always pulled out when she wanted to feel safe. The light from her phone illuminated her face with a warm, soft glow that made her eyes shine in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Her lips were slightly raised. A gentle smile appeared on her face, the very one I used to be able to evoke with a single word. But that smile wasn't for me. She didn't notice me come in. Or she did, but pretended not to. She looked alive, inspired, as if someone had just told her something she had been longing to hear. As if someone had given her the spark I had tried to bring back for months, unsuccessfully. I stood in the doorway watching her, and for the first time I felt that between us lay not a couch, not a blanket, not a phone. Between us lay an entire universe where I no longer existed. She was fully absorbed in the conversation, in the emotion, in the feeling she had long stopped experiencing with me. I took a step forward. She startled. Not loudly, quietly, like someone caught doing something intimate. And that silence told me more than any sound. She quickly covered her phone with the blanket as if hiding something alive, something hot, something that shouldn't fall under my gaze. "Who is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even and calm. She looked up, and in her eyes were feelings I hadn't seen in a long time. Not toward me, toward the conversation, toward the person on the other side of the screen. There was something new, bright, stirring, a feeling more dangerous than any touch. She fell silent. 1 second. Two. Too long. And then she quietly said, "No one." But that no one felt like a blow. Not loud, but precise. So precise that I felt something heavy begin to sink inside me. As if I had finally seen what had long been in front of my eyes, but what I stubbornly refused to notice. I knew her eyes. I knew her smile. I knew how she reacted when she was happy, when she was nervous, when she lied. And right now I saw everything at once. She didn't hide the phone because there was something inappropriate there. She hid it because there was something important. Important, not for me. I understood. This didn't start today. It didn't start yesterday. It had been going on. Growing. Building up like a smoldering ember I had ignored for too long. I looked at her and felt a void growing inside me. Not anger, not jealousy, emptiness. Because emotional cheating isn't a spark. It isn't a mistake. It is a path. And she had been walking it for a long time. And as I stood in front of her, in my home, in my living room, I felt like a stranger for the first time. As if it wasn't my wife smiling at someone else's words. As if my role was that of a bystander watching someone else become the main character in her life. In that moment I understood. She didn't betray me with her body. She betrayed me with her attention. The attention that should have been mine. The attention she had been giving another man every day while I thought everything was fine. I didn't yet know how deep this would go. Didn't know what truth I would soon have to face. But that evening became the point of no return. When I look back at our life before all of this, one thing strikes me. How easily I confused habit with love and silence with peace. Our daily routine looked perfect on paper. So correct that I never even considered the possibility that something might be wrong. We lived like a typical American married couple. Morning coffee, dinner in the evening, shopping and cleaning on weekends. Everything on schedule, everything steady, everything predictable. She would turn on the coffee machine. I would take out the bread. She read the news. I checked my email. On the surface, absolute harmony. But real closeness was disappearing slowly, like a sound that fades day after day until one day you realize you no longer hear it at all. She stopped asking how my day went. Not because she didn't care, but because she no longer expected my answer to make her happy. I stopped asking too, out of habit. We both began living next to each other, not with each other. And I thought this was normal. I was wrong. In the evenings we would sit down to watch a series. She, with her phone in hand, I, with a plate of food. Our conversations grew shorter. She went to bed earlier and earlier, blaming it on being tired. But I had seen real tiredness before. It looked different. And this was something new, something else. She was slipping out of our life not through arguments, not through conflicts, but through absence. Quiet, almost invisible. On weekends we went shopping. I picked groceries, she picked flowers. We filled the cart as always, but her gaze was often somewhere far away. She seemed to do everything automatically. Not irritated and not cold, just without presence. Mechanically. Before, I would have noticed such details immediately, but now I wrote them off as ordinary life phases. We often drove to the ocean to reset. She used to laugh, throw sand at me, run toward the water. Now she sat on the blanket staring at the waves, as if searching for an answer to a question she was afraid to say out loud. I asked, "Are you okay?" She always replied, "Yes, just thinking." I took it as truth. But it was distance. Something was changing inside her, but she didn't speak. And I didn't notice. Because I was convinced, if there are no fights, there are no problems. But the problems were there. They were simply growing in silence. She joked less and less, smiled at my words less and less, looked me in the eyes less and less when we talked. I would say, "I love you." She would reply, "I love you too." But more and more often, her voice had no warmth, no brightness, just a sense of I should answer. It was during this period that he appeared, a man who simply asked her what I had long stopped asking. "Are you really okay?" And most importantly, he listened to the answer. He heard her. He paid attention. She wasn't looking for an affair. She was looking for the feeling of being important to someone. For someone who noticed her emotions, her mood changes, her worries. The things I had stopped noticing. Not out of malice. Out of habit. And habit is the main killer of relationships. She began texting him because it's nice to talk. Then, because he understands. Then, just to vent. And each time this just grew bigger and more meaningful. I saw that she was changing, but I explained it with stress. Work. Seasonal fatigue. Anything except what was right in front of me. She was coming alive from talking to another man. She started smiling at her phone, tucking her hair behind her ear when she texted him, holding her warm tea mug longer when she read something from him, going to bed later, waking earlier, becoming more attentive to herself and more indifferent to me. I took it as personal phases, natural changes. But one day I caught myself thinking, when was the last time she laughed because of me and not because of her phone? And I had no answer. We lived under one roof, but increasingly separate lives. She left emotionally long before I noticed. And the scariest part, the departure wasn't sudden, but gradual. As if step by step she walked away from me until the distance became too great to walk back. And now, looking back, I understand. Nothing happened suddenly. It was a long road. I just spent too long looking in the wrong direction. The direction where she had already been standing alone. After that evening when she hid her phone under the blanket, something inside me shifted. I could no longer dismiss the oddities as fatigue or stress. Now every movement, every word, every glance became part of a puzzle I could no longer ignore. She began living inside her phone. Not just texting, living. In the mornings, she woke up earlier than necessary and reached for the screen immediately. Before, her first gesture was to hug me, to rest her head on my shoulder. Now it was checking messages. I saw how her eyes moved quickly across the screen and how the corners of her lips lifted ever so slightly. It wasn't a smile for the person living next to her. It was a smile for someone who had become more important. When I came into the kitchen, she automatically turned her phone face down. Sometimes she even covered it with her hand, as if afraid the screen might light up. But the strangest part was that she did it unconsciously, as a reflex. That's how people hide things they don't want to explain. And every time the phone vibrated, she flinched. Not from fear, from anticipation. I began to notice that she was changing outwardly. Not dramatically, just small things. Before, she could throw on anything and head to work without looking in the mirror. Now she lingered in the bathroom, fixing her hair, touching up her lips, choosing jewelry. I complimented her. She nodded mechanically, as if it didn't matter. But when her phone lit up again, her eyes sparkled for real. One evening we were watching a show. I said something, made a joke that would have once made her laugh. But she didn't hear me. She was texting. Her fingers danced across the screen, and her smile grew wider. I asked, "Who are you texting?" "Oh, just work stuff," she answered without lifting her eyes. And that ease in lying was worse than the lie itself. I started catching moment after moment. She went to the bedroom, just to make a call. stayed in the bathroom longer with her phone, left the room whenever a new message arrived, changed her phone password, which used to be our shared one, our wedding date. Now it was something else. And it wasn't about protecting her phone. It was about protecting her new emotional world. The strangest thing happened one evening when I came home earlier than usual. Her shoes were by the door, but the house was quiet. I walked into the living room and heard her voice from the bedroom. Soft, gentle, almost a whisper. But not for me. No, no, he doesn't know, she said softly, with a smile in her voice. Pause. It's nice. Another pause. You too. The words were simple, but the tone was devastating. When she came out and saw me, she flinched, as if she hadn't planned to meet my eyes. Have you been home long? Just got here, I said. She smiled, forced, quick, unnatural, and walked past me without touching me, though she used to always hug me in moments like that. I realized she was waiting for his messages. I realized he had become her emotional center. The one she told more than she told me. The one who heard her worries, joys, fears. The one she wanted to look good for. The one whose words made her feel alive. One night, I woke up and saw a light in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, illuminated by the blue glow of her phone. The room was silent, but her face was full of emotion. She smiled, bit her lip, typed quickly as if afraid to lose a thought. I stood in the doorway, and for the first time in months, she looked truly happy, just not with me. When I stepped forward, she turned off the screen abruptly. Too abruptly. Why aren't you asleep? She asked. And you? Just couldn't fall asleep. But her eyes flickered for a split second, just long enough for me to understand. This wasn't insomnia. It was anticipation. Anticipation of the person who had become more important to her than I was. And then the realization hit me, the kind you can't run from. She had left me emotionally long ago. I was simply the last to notice. After the night I caught her smiling at her phone, I no longer had any illusions. But I still held on to the hope that there was some explanation. That I was overreacting. That she had reasons I simply didn't know. But the truth never quiets down when you try to ignore it. It only grows louder. In the following days, her behavior became even more closed off. She almost never let her phone out of her hands. If I walked into the room, she would minimize the app, change the screen, sometimes even turn off the phone completely, something she had never done before. Every notification made her heartbeat quicken. I saw it in the way her pupils widened. She looked me in the eyes less often. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to accidentally reveal emotions that no longer belonged to me. The turning point came on an ordinary day when I came home a little earlier. I heard a voice. Not hers, a man's. Soft, muffled, coming from the phone speaker. She was in the bedroom, the door slightly closed. I stopped in the hallway, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because my body froze on its own. I miss you too, she said quietly. Too softly. Too warmly. Definitely not for me. A pause. A quiet laugh. No, he doesn't suspect anything. I felt something cold rise from my stomach to my chest. Not rage, emptiness. When I opened the door, she jumped so hard that the phone fell from her hands onto the bed. The screen flashed, and I saw a name. Not a number. Not unknown. A name. The very same person she had been smiling at for weeks. Her face went pale. She tried to grab the phone first, but I was faster. And that's when everything finally became clear. On the screen, a chat. Several notifications, one after another, as if he was writing to her at that very moment while she tried to hide the conversation. I miss you already. You looked beautiful today. Wish it was just you and me. These words killed the last traces of doubt. This wasn't friendship. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a phase. This was an affair, emotional, maybe not yet physical, but far more dangerous. What is this? I asked. My voice didn't even sound like my own. She looked at me like someone who had been caught at the exact moment all excuses fall apart. It's just talking, she said, but her eyes were already pleading for mercy, knowing I had seen more than she wanted to reveal. Just talking. I repeated, I miss you already. You looked beautiful today. Wish it was just you and me. That's just talking? She lowered her head. The silence became a confession. I scrolled through the chat. There were no explicit photos, no vulgarities, no clear physical cheating. But there were messages that destroy relationships far more deeply. He doesn't notice me anymore. It's easier to breathe with you. I feel like I can be myself with you. Each sentence was a knife. Not because she said it to another man, but because she had never said it to me. How long has this been going on? I asked quietly. She flinched, as if struck, and whispered, "A few months." Months. So all this time she wasn't just drifting away. She had been walking, step by step, toward another person. He was there when I felt bad, she tried to explain. He listened. He supported me. And you stopped seeing me. There it was. The real reason. So simple and so painful it almost felt absurd. She didn't cheat out of passion. Not out of boredom. Not by accident. She cheated because someone else gave her the one thing a woman depends on in a relationship: attention. I looked at her. Not with hatred. With understanding. We had been living under the same roof, but not together, for a long time. I took stability as a sign of happiness. But for her, stability was the absence of fire. And in that moment I realized, emotional betrayal doesn't begin with the first message. It begins with the last dinner where you didn't look into her eyes. With the last compliment you didn't give. With the last attempt you didn't make to understand what she was feeling. She betrayed me, yes. But we lost each other long before today. When I put the phone down on the bed, I already knew. There was no way back. Not because she wrote to another man, but because she wrote to him the things she should have been able to write to me. And the worst part, she looked relieved, as if the truth finally escaping her lips allowed her to stop pretending. But that relief wasn't for me, and it never would be again. She sat on the edge of the bed as if she didn't know what to do with her hands. The phone lay between us like evidence, like the final stroke confirming what we both already understood, but neither of us wanted to say out loud. The room was so quiet I could hear her swallowing. "We need to talk," I said calmly. Too calmly. She nodded, but kept her eyes lowered, as if she was afraid to meet my gaze, because in it she would see the truth she wasn't ready to face yet. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "A few months," she whispered. No hysteria, no attempts to justify herself. Just honesty that came far too late, when there was nothing left to save. "Why?" I asked. Not to start a fight. I simply wanted to understand how we ended up here. She exhaled sharply, as if gathering strength, then finally looked into my eyes. "Because I felt for a long time that you weren't really with me. You were there, but far." I spoke. "You heard, but you didn't listen." I smiled. "You didn't notice." I tried, and then I just stopped. He listened. He noticed. He asked how I was. He said things I had been wanting to hear for a long time. It wasn't an excuse. It was an explanation, sincere, but one that only made everything worse. "You could have told me," I said quietly. "I tried," she said. "But you didn't see." And he did. Silence fell again, heavier than any words. "Do you like him?" I asked. She froze, pressed her lips together, and exhaled. "Yes, but not the way you think. Not as a man, but as someone who made me feel important again." It was worse than any confession of love, because it was the truth, painfully truthful. "Do you love him?" I asked directly. She averted her gaze. Not immediately, but she did, and that was enough. I didn't need words. "I didn't want to destroy our marriage," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted you to see that something was happening to me. But instead you chose to write to someone else." I finished for her. She covered her face with her hands. "I know. I'm guilty. But part of me just got tired of waiting for you to look at me the way you used to." That hit deeper than anything else. Because somewhere in those words was a truth I didn't want to admit either. I really had stopped paying attention. I had stopped reading her emotions. I had stopped being the man she once chose. But that didn't justify her. And it didn't change the fact she had gone to another emotionally. "Do you want to be with him?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. He just became the place I ran to when I felt lonely." "And you didn't come to me," I said. Not accusing, just stating it. She cried. Not loudly, quietly, almost silently. And I suddenly understood that these weren't tears over losing me. These were the tears of someone who could no longer hold together a double life. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "That we can fix this? That I can forget? That we can start over?" She fell silent again. Because she knew it wasn't possible. "I don't know," she whispered. "I'm just afraid of losing you." "You lost me the moment you stopped choosing me," I said. She covered her face even tighter. And in that moment, I understood the most important thing. This wasn't malice or passion or romance. It was exhaustion, unspoken feelings, the silence that filled everything between us. But no matter what caused it, the outcome was the same. Betrayal is still betrayal. I stood up. She looked up, as if hoping to hear something else. But I said what was already obvious. We need time apart. And a lot of honesty. For the first time in a long time. She nodded, though her eyes were begging, "Don't leave." I turned away because I couldn't look at her face. Too much remained of the person I had loved, and too little of the person I could trust. And when I stepped out of the room, for the first time I felt neither anger nor pain, but emptiness. The kind of emptiness that comes when the decision has already been made, even if you haven't spoken it out loud yet. The night after our conversation was heavy and slow. She moved around the house as if she couldn't find a place for herself, sitting down, standing up again, going into the bedroom, coming back out. I sat in the living room staring at a single point, feeling that everything inside me was already decided. We both understood. This marriage hadn't collapsed today. Today was simply the day we stopped pretending it was standing. In the morning, she looked exhausted. Red eyes, messy hair, movements slow and cautious, as though she feared that one wrong gesture would trigger the final blow. She tried to speak. "Can we somehow fix this?" But her voice carried no conviction. She was saying what she thought she was supposed to say, not what came from her heart. And I realized, she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the familiar life she had gotten used to, even though she had emotionally left it long ago. "I want to understand what we are now," she said. The answer was simple, but heavy. Between us now is the truth, and it destroyed what we thought was solid. She covered her face with her hands. She wasn't crying loudly anymore, just sitting quietly, almost accepting that everything was over. Before me wasn't a woman who had run toward some passionate affair. She was a woman who had lost control of her own life and no longer knew how to return to it. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You didn't hurt me by writing to someone else," I replied. "You hurt me when you stopped writing to me." That line struck her more than any accusation, because it was the core of everything. She didn't choose another man. She chose attention, the kind she no longer received at home. But in the end, she lost us both. I began packing my things. Not quickly, not angrily, just calmly. She stood near me, watching, and each item I placed in the suitcase seemed to tear away a part of her old life. She wanted to say something, but she already understood that words no longer mattered. "You're leaving?" she finally asked. "Today, yes," I said. "For a short time, or a long time. It depends on whether we're capable of honesty." She nodded, but I could see it. She already knew we would never return to what we once called a marriage. We could talk, analyze, even try, but every relationship stands on two pillars: trust and attention. We had lost both. As I reached the door, she quietly said, "I really did love you." I turned, not for hope, but for closure. "You loved me, but you stopped choosing me, and someone else started. So you went where you felt seen. That explains it, but it doesn't justify it." She lowered her gaze. She didn't argue. For the first time, she didn't try to defend herself. I stepped outside, and the door closed almost silently behind me. The air outside was cool, but for the first time in a long while, I breathed freely. No anticipation of lies. No waiting for someone else's messages. No attempt to decipher what was happening behind my back. Freedom doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes it comes with emptiness. But honest emptiness is better than false warmth. I walked down the street and felt. The pain will come. The silence will come. The thoughts will return again and again. But along with them, something else appeared. Something I hadn't felt in many months. I was finally stepping out of a story in which I had long ceased to be the main character. It wasn't a victory or a defeat. It was growth, harsh, but necessary. Now I knew. Attention is the language of love. And when people stop speaking it, a marriage begins to die long before anyone ever says the word cheating.